There are a variety of ways in which one's personal information can be compromised and placed into the public. One of the most commonly reported ways we hear about now is when you are shopping at a retailer and you use an electronic form of payment, such as a debit card or a credit card. There are instances in which a hacker can find a non-secure portion of that retailer's network that's connected to their point of sale system, and your personal information, which is transmitted at the time you make your purchase, can then be subjected to the hacker's intrusion. If you were to receive notice that your personal information has been compromised, you should first and foremost check all of your accounts, bank accounts, various payment accounts that you may have set up with utility companies or maybe the mortgage provider for your home. You should as well contact your bank and ask for them to reissue credit cards or debit cards so that the numbers that, in essence, the hackers have obtained are no longer useful. Those numbers will be disassociated with your active accounts, and new numbers, new cards can be issued, and that offers a tremendous amount of reassurance for consumers. Well, that, of course, is always our first question when we are alerted of these type occurrences. There is a set of industry standards that retailers and banks and essentially any entity that uses credit or electronic forms of payment, those standards are to be followed to prevent these type breaches. And so when there is a data breach, we look to the retailer first to make certain that they have been following industry standards. And very often we find that they have not followed all of the standards which would have otherwise prevented a breach. The retail industry must make certain that they are compliant with the current industry standards, specifically for PCI DSS, and as well that they maintain in good order their networks and their systems that allow for not only the processing of the electronic payments, but also whether those systems have any vulnerabilities that allow hackers to penetrate the system and compromise their customers' information. And they need to take that responsibility seriously and devote adequate resources, both in terms of money and talent within their organizations to make sure that these systems are being properly monitored. Again, we conduct an investigation, and when we believe that we can supply evidence that standards have not been met or followed, then we do believe there is a good basis for a lawsuit. And very often that takes the form of a class of consumers filing a lawsuit on behalf of all commonly situated people who were affected by a breach. And that is because the class mechanism allows for individuals to band together and bring their litigation in which they can present the facts, present the evidence against a large retailer. They don't always become class actions. There's a process by which a class must be certified by the court. Certainly these type cases are very often ripe for class certification, but that may not happen, in which case individual causes of action may move forward. What will typically happen is that consumers affected by a breach, for instance, if you shop at a certain retailer and that retailer's allowed for personal information to be disclosed without authorization, the law very often requires that notification be sent in writing so that consumers may begin monitoring their accounts. It is difficult to communicate to all class members every single step, because every day we are working on the case on behalf of millions of people, and so it's very difficult to make contact with millions of people on a daily basis. However, we do inform of the key moments or the key issues that arise in a case, and again, we find that our website, our blog posts, sometimes an email to the consumers is a very effective way of communicating the important issues in a case. And as well, I should say that these cases are so frequently reported in the media that the various media outlets will often supply that type of information as well. Data breaches are difficult to legislate because it is a very rapidly developing type of crime, and the persons who perpetrate the crime are very sophisticated. They devote essentially their entire life to these type of compromises in other vendors or retailers' systems. Presently, there is legislation that affects what retailers or those who use credit cards, meaning businesses that use credit cards, what steps they must take to protect consumers' information. But there is not much legislation as to what consumers may do once their information has been compromised. And I think that's an area of law, and specifically legislation, that will be developing. It is difficult, but consumers should be very mindful of, again, monitoring their accounts, even if they have not been notified of a breach. As well, consumers should be careful of which retailers they allow to have access to their personal information. Of course, shopping or paying with a credit or a debit card is a convenience. It's at this point a fact of life in our society and in our culture. So I don't necessarily believe that consumers should stop using electronic forms of payment, but you need to be mindful that every time you're using an electronic form of payment, information is being collected. And educate yourself. Read the store's privacy policy. They are often posted online. Have an understanding of what information is being collected about you, and ask the store, how long is that information being stored? If consumers start taking a more active role in how this data is being utilized and how the data are being stored for prolonged periods of time, I do believe that the retail industry will respond and realize that consumers expect more, and they will be culpable, and they need to act responsibly.